Welcome everyone, very big welcome to Motion 72, supporting our branches question time. My name is Becky Ty. I'm the regional convener for the Eastern region of Unison, and for one night only I've been given the honour of attempting to be our very own Fiona Bruce. Just like question time, I'm going to take a question that has been submitted from the audience, and then this question will be addressed by our panel. And then the floor will be opened up for further comments from the audience on that question. We have a lot of ground to cover tonight, so I'm going to hopefully be keeping a tight rein on the proceedings. Questions which were submitted in advance focused on the following topics that we're going to look at in an order. So rest assured we'll open the floor to all other questions after we've addressed these, and like I say, where possible, I'm going to bring you in from the floor sooner, depending on time. So we've put the questions into the following groups. So number one, effect on my branch of Motion 72 and the Transitional Arrangements. Number two, branch support and organising fund. Number three, effect of Motion 72 on different types of branches. Number four, understanding the new branch funding formula. Number five, using retired members and different types of resources. So if you've got a question and you'd like to come in on those, or if there's any other topics, there will be an opportunity after those sections of tonight's event is finished. So on our panel tonight, we have Josie Bird, Chair of the Branch Resources Review, and Lilian Mesa, Scottish Regional Convener and Vice Chair of the Branch Resource Review. And I'm delighted to say that General Secretary Christina McAnea has also joined us. Before we begin, we'll be running two polls today, one now and one at the end. So please could you submit your responses when prompted. I'll just run through some housekeeping. Can I remind the audience of the importance of treating each other with dignity and respect at all times? And I'm expected that standard to be met during this event, as they have with our previous webinars. If you have a question for the panel, tonight we are using the chat function. The chat function is open so that you can let us know that you wish to ask a question and the nature of that question, but please do not ask your question in the chat function. Just put your name and the nature of your question. We're going to encourage a lot of contributions, and we'd like to hear from as many of you as possible. So if you can keep your contributions to no longer than 2 minutes. We've been joined by two BSL interpreters. They are Karen Green and David Wycherley. If you'd like to use their services, please look for them in the participants list and pin them to your screen. You do this via the participants list. We also have a captioning facility in Zoom. Caroline Booth of CJ Captioning will be doing this. If you're using a separate screen, you need to use the link that was sent to you in the registration email. If you do not have it, no problem. We can send you a dedicated link now. Please can you raise your hand and that will be arranged for you. We would like to keep everyone on mute for the majority of the time. We will unmute you so that you can ask your question. And like I said, the chat function is there for you to indicate the nature of your question. Really helps me as chair to be able to keep on top of that. So yeah, just use the chat for that, please. We have IT support at the meeting. Anyone with issues with IT, please email the contact details in your joining instructions. And just a reminder that the session is being recorded. Oh, deep breath. So if you're all sitting comfortably, we're going to begin by showing you a short film. Thanks very much. So just a reminder that in the first section, we're going to be taking questions that have been submitted in advance on the following 5 themes: effect on my branch of motion 72 and the transitional arrangements, the branch support and organising fund, effect of motion 72 on different types of branches, so that's large, small, geographical spread, etc. Understanding the new branch funding formula, and using retired members and different types of resources. But I'm going to step straight into my role as Fiona Bruce, and I'm going to use my chair's privilege from the offset. So do bear with me. I, as a convener, have obviously been talking to my region and branches, and I've been involved in these webinars. At different events, the same issue has been coming up time and again. So this question is for yourself, Christina. The branch resource review did not include a staffing review. It wasn't part of the remit of the review, but obviously, could you give some detail on this to the group, please? Thank you.
Of course, Becky, thank you, and thank you everyone for coming tonight. Although it wasn't part of the remit of the review and hasn't been part of this 2-year process that we've been going through over this, when I was standing as General Secretary, I made a big point of saying we needed to make sure that we had our resources, and that includes staffing, of course, in the right place at the right time. So the key thing for me is that we want to do a review, a real proper review of staff. It's been a number of years since we did one in Unison, and it's time to look again at the roles that people do to make sure they're in the right place at the right time and doing the jobs that need to be done to support members and branches as things have changed over the years. And I've been doing this, I'll be doing this in collaboration with the Unison Staffing Committee, and I've obviously discussed the outline of it with, I can see Maureen's on the call, Maureen Lamarinelle, who's Chair of Unison Staffing Committee. And Maureen and I are in agreement on this, as is the Staffing Committee, that actually this is essential that we do this. Now, as you would expect, I'm sure you're used to your employers saying to you, or you'll have heard this many times, we're doing a review, and people's initial reaction is often, oh my goodness, they're doing this to cut jobs or, you know, save money for the organisation. And so our staff, I'm sure, will feel the same. And one of the things I've said is this is actually about making sure we've got staff in the right place at the right time. We've got staff who are properly trained and supported to do the job that needs to be done. So it's about giving something to staff as well. But just to say this, that this is a genuine staffing review. I expect it to be done in a timely manner. This one shouldn't take 2 years. It should be done much quicker than that. And it will be done about looking at where our resources need to sit. And it's all tied up with the work that we've been doing and the commitments that I've certainly given, and I know others have, to make sure that we are fully resourcing our regions and our devolved parts of Unison to make sure they can support the branches that they look after. So that's the primary function of it, will be to make sure that we have the right staff with the right skills doing the jobs where they're most needed.
Many thanks, Christina, and it's great that you can be here with us today to answer that question, and obviously the next ones as they come along with Josie and Lilian. I'm going to sit firmly back in my position as chair now, and I'm going to move to what would be our second question. This comes from Dawn Clough from Leeds Local Government. Dawn, if you're here, would you like to unmute and pose your question now to the panel, please?
Hello, my name's Dawn Clough from Leeds, and the new treasurer. As far as I can see, the illustration that I've had is going to make Leeds look worse off. So my question is, when will branches receive transitional financial funding information for 22 to 24?
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Dawn. And Tuesday we were doing the branch funding formula webinar, and I praised all treasurers for taking on that role, and I praise you too. I hats off to any treasurer in our union. I'm going to probably bring Josie in on that, but before I do, we've had similar questions from other activists which are along a similar vein. So I'm going to tie those up and I'm going to ask our panel to look at all of those questions. So we've had a question from Katrina Kuma, which was, what does this mean for my branch, CTM Health Board? Elizabeth Onabanjo has asked, what are the implications and changes of motion 72 towards branch finances? Rena Wood has asked, is there any data on how much branches will gain financially? And Christina Diane-Sagari Guglimoni has said, how will my branch be affected and when is this new system going to start? So similar questions that I've grouped there together for our panel. But Josie, would you like to come in first, please?
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Becky. And thanks for the question, Dawn and everyone else. They are very similar. So rather than maybe focusing on each one individually, I'll try and sort of answer them collectively, if that's okay. But firstly, given that it was your question, Dawn, I'll try and address that one specifically initially. So when we put together the motion and the report on branch resources, it was absolutely supported by all of the layers that it needed to go through to find its way onto the Special Delegate Conference agenda. That is, the working group agreed it, the NEC's Finance Committee did, and then so did the NEC. And we absolutely believe in the whole package that has been developed. However, we've been trying to engage and consult with activists as an ongoing process, and subsequent to the motion going in, there were some issues around transitional arrangements and protection effectively that got raised with us, especially as the outturn of the 2020 branch finances started to come forward. So what we've done is we've agreed these transitional arrangements, which we think reflect what it was that activists were telling us they felt that they needed. And because we've seen a lot of volatility in branch finances over 2020, it's currently positive volatility. Branches have had made a surplus of £11 million in 2020 collectively, which is the largest amount that we've ever seen from branches. It's normally somewhere in the region of about £500,000 to £1 million per year. So, you know, as a comparison, you can see how huge it is. But really what branches were saying, because of that volatility, they felt that they needed some sort of transitional arrangements. The transitional arrangements will apply from the 1st of January 2022 if the motion 72 is passed at the Special Delegate Conference. And they'll apply from that date because that's the date that the new funding formula would become effective from. Effectively, what the transitional arrangements will do is we will calculate each branch's funding using the 2001 branch funding formula and the proposed 2021 funding formula. And if your branch would receive more funding under the 2001 formula, that is the formula that you will continue to be funded on in the years 2022, 23 and 24. And that'll give your branch time to plan and prepare and make any arrangements that you need to make for 2025 when the protection or transitional arrangements will run out. So absolutely no branch will receive less funding as a result of these proposals in the first 3 years of operation. And hopefully what that'll do is that'll take us through this period of volatility and a quieter period so that branches have the time to do the planning work and the preparation work that they need to do. In terms of sort of some of the broader issues, people have asked specifically about what it means for their branch. I can't comment on individual branch circumstances. I don't have every branch's circumstances in front of me here today, but broadly the same principles do apply to all branches. However, what we've tried to do is recognise that some branches are not being well served by the existing funding formula. It was designed 20 years ago. Service groups such as community didn't exist 20 years ago. So the whole political landscape has changed, and the branch funding formula that we're hoping to be able to implement going forward recognises that changing landscape, and it starts to hopefully meet the needs of branches much better. It gives greater weighting to things like the level of fragmentation, the number of different employers branches are organising across now than they were 20 years ago. So hopefully that gives some reassurance to people in terms of the financial implications. On how many branches will gain and how many won't, that's a really, really difficult question for us to answer, because if we did that calculation based on 2019 data, and then we did it again based on 2020 data, everything was kind of thrown up in the air and turned upside down. It's always going to be a movable feast, because if branches continue to add to their reserves on an annual basis, their funding won't go up. It will stay the same, or it'll go down. But if branches spend their reserves in future years, their funding will go up. So each year, what you'll probably see is hopefully some stability, but also a little bit of fluctuation as some branches gain and some branches don't on an annual basis. The one thing we would stress, though, is of course the branch funding formula is one of 14 proposals. So there's other ways that we expect to be able to support branches better in the future as well. So I hope that answers all of those questions. Thanks, Becky.
Thanks, Josie. Christina or Lilian, if either of you want to come in on this question, to Dawn's or the other ones that we've brought together under the transitional arrangements that the union's proposing.
I'm happy to come in on a bit of it. I mean, Lilian and Josie are much more involved in the detail than I am, but just to reconfirm what Josie's just said, which is, for the next 3 years, the transitional arrangements mean that no one will lose out, no branch will lose. There will be nobody getting less funding, but a significant number getting more funding because of different circumstances. So just that, again, reassure people on that. And the other one is, if you are concerned about the impact on your individual branch, there's still time to contact your region, who should be able to give you more detailed information, because they have been given that information. So if you've not had that conversation at the moment with your regional management team, now is the time to contact them.
Many thanks for that, Christina. And yeah, obviously as a convener myself, we've been busily working and engaging with our branches to go through that, and happy to still take questions from our branches, as I'm sure other conveners and regional secretaries would. Dawn, do you want to come back on those answers or comment at all?
Well, it's very reassuring along the lines that you've said. The one element that I think is missing is the transitional funding that we're currently receiving. If you took the base funding and compared it with the new formula, we're worse off, but it's the loss of the current transitional funding. Did you call it motion 56 or something? It's that loss which will make us worse off. So I'm not quite sure how your transitional arrangements will still impact Leeds because of that element.
Okay, thanks very much, Dawn. Do any of the panel want to come back on the point that Dawn's making there? I mean, it is a rhetorical question.
Well, just to say again that reinforce that the whatever you're currently receiving under whatever formula that is currently being applied to you under the new transitional arrangements for the next 3 years, you will not see any cut. So whatever system is being used to give you, whatever the formula is, whatever calculation is being used on for your particular branch, you will not get less than that. You may get more than that. If the new system would deliver higher than that, then over the next 3 years, in any of those 3 years, if you would be entitled to more, you'll get that. But if you would have been getting less, you wouldn't be affected by it. Does that help?
It does. It sounds very reassuring. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Christina, and thanks for your question, Dawn, and also to our other questions. I can't see any questions being raised in the chat at the moment about transitional arrangements, so I'm going to move us on to our next question, which is from Julie Ray from Kingston Hospital branch, and I hope I've got your surname right. Julie, are you here to ask your question?
Yes, if I remember rightly, I did it a while ago and I've forgotten exactly the wording, but it's really about health branches in particular have real problems with supporting members, because branch secretaries and chairs if they're health workers, they work shifts, They can't just leave their job to come and talk to a member. So I was working as an admin for the branch, and it made a huge difference. We got an influx of new members because there was somebody in the office. We're lucky enough to have an office, even though it's a converted cupboard, but it does operate and staff know where to find. But I've retired, and it's not normal for branches to have individual branches to have admin support.
Okay, thank you very much, Julie. We also had a comment, a comment rather than a question on this from Billy Reynolds, which was this motion will not provide branches with the resources they need to represent members in the front line. I'm gonna use you while you're here, Christina, and go to you first on Julie's point and also that comment, please.
Sorry, yeah, my house phone just started to ring there and I had to switch it off. Yeah, no, I fully appreciate, Julie, what you're saying about health branches. As you know, I was head of health for a number of years, so I fully get that. And I think what happens under this new system will be that there actually, if you look at what we're giving in terms of the branch support and organising fund that goes to regions, that actually there's more flexibility in that for branches to be able to enter into some relationship either with the region to buy in additional support or to be given additional support depending on the circumstances and how much money is available. So there is more flexibility now than there was under the previous regional support systems that we had. But also because of the money that you've been given, because of the resources, there will be a way, hopefully, that we'll be putting additional resources into regions to be able to support precisely branches like yours, and indeed that whole range of other branches that we know where it's been more difficult for them to access staff. There's a huge variation just now at the moment between some branches have large numbers of staff and some branches have absolutely none, and sort of everything in between that. So there will be more flexibility available to regions and devolved countries to be able to support branches in this. I don't know, I know Lilian's in a health branch. I don't know if Lilian wants to come in on this.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks, Becky. Yeah, Julie, excellent question. I think we all know the pressures that branches are under, but more so over the last 15 months, the health and social care branches have been under in terms of supporting members, keeping members safe, and indeed keeping communities safe. And it's a huge and important job that we've asked those health branches to do. As a health activist, I know only too well the difficulties of shift working, for example, in terms of having that dedicated support in an office. So when we went out to engage branches, and this whole process has been an engagement throughout in terms of the last 2 years. So our engagement plan was to seek feedback from branches in terms of what matters to you, what's important to you, and what can we as a review group take forward on your behalf. And the #1 priority that came in from the 357 branches that responded to the questionnaire from every service group, every region and every branch was time. Time to support members and time to organise and develop strategies within the branch. So you'll see from the package, the whole package that's going to conference in Motion 72, there is an element in there to have a robust and detailed facility time strategy, and that will become a significant priority for the union. So that for me is hugely important, that we take that time to look at our facility time agreements across the union and to come up with the best practice facility time support for those branches like yours, a health branch. Christina's picked on the branch support and organising fund. I'm hugely excited by the concept of organising and the concept of having this fund. This will be a great asset within the region. It will be flexible to meet the needs of the branches within those regions. So what's important in Scotland and a priority in Scotland might not necessarily be the same priority in Eastern or Northern. So this opportunity, I think, really, really excites me, because it gives us that opportunity to the organising framework for you as a branch to set your priority, and for that priority to influence the strategic direction within the region. So with the facility time built in, with the branch support and organising framework, and the real focus on improving our IT infrastructure and system, again, will free up time for really hard-pressed activists to organise it within that space. So there's a number of elements in this package that will suit and indeed cover exactly what you're asking, Julie, about time, about resources, and about making sure that those branches that don't have that dedicated facility time and that dedicated admin support can prioritise that, and the regions can take that on board in terms of their priorities within their strategic planning for the branch support and organising fund. So I see really positive elements in this for you and your branch.
Many thanks, Lilian and Christina. Julie, do you want to come back on those responses?
Just very quickly, just to say thanks, and it's really particularly for health, because they haven't had the same sort of facility time as local government. I know it's been cut in local government, but it means that traditionally it's the members, the branch officers that have done the admin side of it. It's a bit too much now because it's very complicated. I had a case today of someone who was in debt, and you know, an ordinary member wouldn't necessarily know to refer them to the CAB or to a credit union. So you need to have a whole load of resources in the branches. So, but thank you for taking that on board, and we look forward to that going forward.
Many thanks.
Can I just make one other point, Becky, if that's okay? Which
Sure.
is, because I'm just looking at some of the things in the chat. So I know that many branches who don't have admin support, and this came out in the point that Lilian was making about in the survey, many branches don't want the additional responsibility of employing staff, and I get that. Particularly if you're a relatively small branch, you don't want then the added responsibility of having to deal with employing your own staff. And so one of the things that the flexibility will be that you'll be able to talk to the region about what support you can get from the region as part of this, the fund, and also the way that money is spent. So that's what I meant when I was saying you'll be able to go to the region to look at what resources they've got, what resources the branch can access from the region.
Thanks very much, Christina. Yeah, I'm seeing the chat's warming up. So we've touched on the branch support and organising fund, and I can see that John Hughes has said that he's got a quick question on the organising fund. So John, can I bring you in to ask your question, please?
Oh. Yeah, I'm trying to. Oh, there we are. Yeah, thanks, Becky. Speaking really as a regional treasurer, just confirmation really. Hopefully this will go through next week, and just wondering, the extra 1.5% in the organising fund, the new regional pool, then will that actually come in next year? So basically in effect from the 1st of January. And basically my question is around I suppose the budget committee, which is currently in place now. I don't know whether that will use the same committee, but will the plans for the region and all the work that goes along with it, then all the strategic consultations and chats we'll be having, will that be kicking in on the 1st of January, or does that actually kick in later? And can I just take this opportunity as well just to thank Josie? I've said this in particularly at regional council and regional committee. I think it's been a long task for everybody involved in this, and just take the opportunity to thank Josie in particular, because I know it's been going on for 10 years. And hopefully this will give a bit of rest to her personally, and obviously Becky and others who have taken the time over however many evenings. And I just hope for your sake this is the last one. So thank you for that.
Thanks very much, John. And if we were at a national delegate conference, I would definitely be buying you a beer for that compliment next week, but we're not. So hopefully you'll forget I said that. Thanks ever so much for your question, John. Lilian, could I come to you for that, please?
Yeah, absolutely, Becky.
Thank you.
So, John, thanks for your points. I see you're still speaking. Are you still making a contribution because you're on mute or somebody's mute you? So I'll just keep going until I'm told to stop. So your question or your points around the branch support and organising fund in terms of how that will be strategically delivered within the region. There is an opportunity for, as I've said, through the branch organising framework for the branch to set their priorities. The branch priorities then can become part of the regional priorities. And this is really important. I don't think as a regional convener, as convener for Scotland, that I should sit with this. When this motion is passed next week, we will be having discussions about the priorities for organising immediately. We're already having those conversations anyway. So we have those conversations in our lay committees. This fund will be governed by a lay committee. It will be, the oversight and the governance arrangements will be in place by the lay structures. So this is a real fantastic opportunity for us to effect this fund in a transformational way, to make sure that the organising agenda that the branches think are hugely important to them feed into the regional strategy that then delivers across the whole region. And I think it's really, really important to say this. This is not done on a grace and favour basis. This is done to make sure that we get the best possible outcomes for branches across the whole region. And in Scotland, we did 5 regional meetings to talk about the branch resources review in its entirety. And one of the ways in terms of how we organised those meetings was to do them in geographical areas, because we want branches in those geographical areas to start to talk to each other, start to combine their resources, to start to think about, as Julie said, where there is that deficit in terms of that admin approach. How can we support some of those branches that don't have that dedicated support? We do it collectively. We work as a collective in the region. We work as a collective across different disciplines, whether that be different service groups or sectors. So this is a fantastic opportunity. Should we wait till next January to have those conversations? Hell no. Let's get those conversations started. Let's have those conversations now, and let's make sure that we're ready, have strategies in place to deliver on our organising objectives.
Many thanks, Lilian. John, did you want to come back briefly on that?
Yeah, I suppose just to confirm that the actual funding will be coming down the line then on the 1st of January in effect. Well, if I can say 2020, well, what are we in 2022 then? I totally agree with what Lilian just said, but just the practice when really. Thank you.
Oh, you're back on mute, John, but I think we've got your point, and I'm going to move us on. So appreciate your question to the panel.
Yeah, the funding will be in place in 2022. Yeah,
that's correct. Yeah. We've got there's a question in the chat from Gabrielle Lawler about buying services. So I'd like to bring Gabrielle in now. If Gabrielle is still here.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it was just something that Christina said about sort of when the funding goes in, and we would be able to buy services from the region. I just wanted a bit more clarity because I can't understand why we would need to buy services from the region.
Yeah, sorry, I think I used the wrong term. What I meant was, as I said earlier, and I was saying to Julie, if I know many branches don't want to employ their own staff, but they may want to enter an arrangement. We've done this in the past with branches, you know, kind of co-funding of different posts within branches and regions. So it's just whether there's more flexibility around things like that for branches, and that you can talk to regions about how you want to, you know, what you want to do in terms of getting specifics of support for your branch. That's not to say you don't have to buy in services, as in the region will still be there to provide the normal support that it does for everybody at the moment. I'm just meaning if, like, you know, very specific, if a branch has got something very specific in mind that they wanted to do, you'd probably be able to get advice from the region on the best way to do that. And that might mean, you know, you might want to do something with them.
Right, okay.
It's not that you'll then have to get charged for the stuff that the region does.
Yeah.
Apologies if that was the way that came across.
Thank you. Thanks for clarity.
Brilliant. Okay, Josie?
I just wanted to add a tiny little addendum to that as well, because there's additional benefits to maybe having those discussions with your region, because something that branches say to us quite often is they want an additional resource, whether that's, you know, to support casework or admin or organising. However, they don't necessarily want a full-time resource, and by having those conversations with the region, they can provide a really supportive role in terms of helping coordinate a shared resource across multiple branches as well, which can give much more flexibility, give a huge benefit to branches, but obviously not such a huge responsibility to branches. So I think there's all sorts of benefits in terms of having those conversations with the region, so they can help support you get exactly what you need, absolutely tailored to your own particular needs, but also try and meet the needs of other branches as well.
Many thanks, Josie. I'm going to move us on now, and I'm conscious that we've got questions in the chat, which I think we can come back to when we go to topics in a short while. So I've made a note of those questions where we've actually got questions, and I'm going to move us on now to our next question, which comes from Maggie Griffin from Haringey Local Government. Maggie, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yep, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So my question was really around, if I can remember it, was around what support we give those smaller branches who not only struggle financially, but actually struggle with things like ensuring that they get proper time to do their work. The word's gone out of my head. And the resources. I know we're not going to have the Regional Poor and Fighting Fund, but for those who might need a bit more support around organising workplaces, with not just with organising to get people on board joining the union, but also around organising the issues at work when you've only got maybe one or two, facility time is what I was looking for. Thank you. Facility time, especially for those who have so few reps in their particular area and have very small numbers and obviously have very small funding. What we're doing to, I'm going to assume, but the question is, what are we going to do to make sure that these smaller branches have all the finances that they need in order to get the resources that they need to succeed and grow?
Okay.
Did that make sense? Did it get there?
It made sense, Maggie. Yeah, and if we don't quite answer your question, we'll come back and we'll double check with you. So obviously the question there is about smaller branches and the impact of the proposal on smaller branches and their needs. We've had a question about looking at types of branches. We had one submitted in advance from Duncan Beaumont, which was, please can you explain how the geographical spread of the branches will impact on budgets in the future? And Pat Jones has asked about specific funding for complex branches. So obviously we're looking now at the fact that we've got branches that come in different shapes and sizes. Panel, who'd like to take Maggie's question and those other issues about the types of branches we've got and this proposal?
I'm happy to start us off.
Thanks, Josie.
I am like Queen Stato, I think, but you know, I can live with that. So I'm kind of, Maggie, to take your question most specifically initially, there's not, it's not just, our proposals are not just for small branches, but we think there's a lot in there for small branches as well. To give you a few examples, so the first thing, obviously, which is the branch funding formula, and I think your question was specifically about finances for branches. Things like those, so the basic level of the branch funding formula currently starts at 20%, and we're proposing that will start at 21% in the future. And so that applies to all branches, regardless of their size. But then we go on to measure the other circumstances in your branch, and there's 5 measurements, and there's additional entitlements. I don't want to sort of dwell and talk about the technicalities of the branch funding formula in too much depth in this particular session, because of course we're talking about the whole of the package, and we did a session specifically on the branch funding formula earlier this week, and I don't know if that's already managed to go onto our website. Not maybe everybody wants to spend an hour and a half of their life watching it either. I completely accept that, but I think a lot of the questions were probably addressed there, and if people are in both, they probably don't want it all repeated. But the branch funding formula has been designed to measure the circumstances of your branch, whether you're a small branch or a large branch. It measures your circumstances and it gives you a calculation based on your needs, and that applies regardless of the size of your branch. It then also measures your wealth, and if you're a very wealthy branch, it does apply some restrictions to that. And I did see somebody asked in the chat about branches that could be funded at 19% from 2025, and that's branches that we would consider to have very, very high reserves. And to give you a small snippet of information on that, we do have, it's not all branches, it's not even the majority of branches, but we do have some branches that are adding to their reserves every single year and are now in a position where they've got more than £100 per capita, in terms of £100 per member in terms of their branch reserves. And we make no bones about the fact that we think it's reasonable to fund those branches at a lower level, because what they've been demonstrating on an annual basis is that they haven't needed to spend all of their branch funding. But if their circumstances change and they just start to spend all of their funding and some of their reserves, they'll come down and they'll start getting funded at a higher level. But also in particular around smaller branches, Maggie and the other people who asked some of these questions, the funding formula is part of a package. We've touched on the branch support and organising fund, but that's there for all branches regardless of their size. I mentioned a moment ago how we can pool branches effectively so they can all utilise one resource in terms of a person maybe sometimes. So that's there specifically for smaller branches who want some resource but don't need a whole full-time individual to support them. Things like CaseWeb, that will be subsidised for smaller branches under 2,000 members. Things like the branch support and organising fund can be used to buy equipment for your for branches if you need support to do that. And so if we're going to continue to utilise things like online or hybrid, part physical, part online meetings, it will enable your branch to participate in them when it's appropriate. A facility time campaign, it's for all branches, but all of these things absolutely could provide massive benefits for small branches as well. Pat, your question around complex branches, I know you, Pat, and I know that you work in the community sector and you come from a branch that is wholly community sector based. I have to say, I really think that some of our proposals will be of greatest benefit to branches like yours, because your branch was just not on our radar when we were doing the work in 2001. You've been massively on our radar this time around, because we know that you're a group of branches that have been particularly have not been well served by the existing arrangements just because you were not in existence. So we've been very mindful in terms of ensuring that our proposals are going to be able to better meet your needs. I've talked quite a lot, so I don't want to go on, and there's probably other people that want to come in, but I hope that gives some example of different ways in which our proposals can meet the needs of branches, be they small, large, complex or straightforward. I don't know we have many straightforward branches, but there's possibly one out there.
Thank you very much. I did answer it very well. Thank you. Very clear.
Wonderful. Thanks ever so much. Do either of our panel want to come in on that looking at our branches and obviously expanding on how the branch resource review package is there for our branches, all shapes and sizes at all?
I think Josie's covered it, Becky. Just to say that throughout the discussion, the 2-year discussion, and the many discussions we had around this, our aim and objective was to leave no one behind and to put front and centre those branches that needed our support, and make sure that we had systems and a package in place that did just that. And Josie's covered exactly the level of detail and the depth that we went into to make sure that that became a reality and that we delivered on what was asked. And I think our survey, I sound like a game show, what our survey told us was really important, and that every single member of the branch resources 24 listened and put those responses as our priorities for delivering the outcomes that you've got in the motion 72. So making sure our branches are vibrant, making sure that the systems and support is there, and making sure the resources are there through all of the different 14 elements.
Many thanks, Lilian. That's great. We'll move on to the next question we've had submitted, which was from Stephen Parkinson, and I've checked the participants. I can't see that he's actually joined us tonight, so I'll give a moment in case he has joined us. But if not, I will pose Stephen's question on his behalf. So Stephen is from Oxfordshire Health Services branch, and it was about different ways of sharing information about the motion. His question was that graphs on the motion could have been better. So why were they not used to illustrate the motion? Lilian, can I bring you straight back in on Stephen's point, please?
So I absolutely understand what Stephen's saying. We went round the regions, we went round the service groups, we went round the self-organised groups. We did huge amounts of engagement with activists across the country. And when we did our presentations, we had a number of graphs in there because we felt that those graphs gave a pictorial illustration of what we were saying in terms of a very quick glance. This is what it means. When you get to conference, and when you get to writing a motion and submitting a motion through the proper processes, then there's a standard that we need to follow. And part of that standard is there needs to be an articulation, a written articulation of what you want to see change, what you're proposing, and what that looks like, not necessarily a pictorial change. So the motion itself had to be written so that people understood what the ask was, what the outcomes were, and what the NEC were required to do as a consequence of the motion being passed. So it is very difficult to put that into a graph and for that to get through conference processes, and for standing orders to say that meets the criteria that's set within the rules of engagement to take a motion at conference. There are those graphs out there. It is difficult to share the graphs without having the narrative around it. And many of the colleagues on this call have been to a number of our meetings, so they've heard and seen the graphs being presented, and they've heard the narrative that goes alongside that. And if you look at something cold without the narrative, it doesn't really give you that clear picture. But if you have the narrative and the graph as a pictorial representation of that narrative, it is for a lot of people much easier and clearer to see and understand. But to get a motion through conference, it would not be acceptable for a motion to have those graphs within it. So I don't know if that covers the point that Stephen, or the question that he was asking, but we've done a whole host of different things. We've presented different formats using graphs, using the presentations on the presentations that we've done, and articulated that through the narrative that Josie, I and others and yourself have done in terms of presenting to groups of members. So I hope that covers, Stephen, your point, but it would not be appropriate, it would not be acceptable, and it would not get through our standing orders if we presented a motion in graph. We need to articulate through the narrative what it is we're asking, and I think that is the only way that we would get that motion on conference agenda. The other graphs and the like are there. But again, it's difficult just to send them out without that narrative around it and that supporting narrative that goes with it.
Thanks very much, Lilian. I've moved on so quickly. I've just been notified. I can't see if you've got your hands raised, but I've been told that I think it's Pat Jones has their hand raised. I can't see hands, so don't do them. But obviously, I can see that Pat has. So Pat, obviously, I appreciate that you'd asked about complex branches in the previous part that we talked about. So can I bring you back in, and we'll just rewind slightly to that section.
Okay, thanks, Becky. I'd like to say to Josie, thank you for mentioning us. In meetings, I play a little game where I put a graph. We just talked about graphs. As to how many times NHS branches get mentioned, how many times local government get mentioned, and how many times community get mentioned. And basically, community doesn't get mentioned. So it's really nice to actually be mentioned. I am aware of the fact that we weren't in existence when everything was first organised. We are a relatively new phenomena, but Unison really hasn't moved to support us, you know, with the complexity. I mean, my branch covers the whole of Wales. I also have members in England. I was doing a meeting the other day with members in Kent, which was different. I think our concern, having been to a lot of these meetings, and I do have some understanding of this now, not as good as my treasurer, but that's why I'm not a treasurer. But my concern, I mean, 2 years ago, we put in for an increase in branch funding. We are a member-rich branch. You know, we have 5,000 members, so we're not tiny, but we're very poor because most of our members are low paid. 85% of our members are on minimum wage. So, and we cover the whole of Wales. So it can be a 10-hour round trip just to go and do a disciplinary, and that's not unusual. We pay for staff because we don't have a choice. So that comes out of our funding, and all of our reps are shift workers, and they're all low paid shift workers. And that's why we have to pay. We only have 2 members of staff, part-time admin and 1 area organizer grade, but he just does casework because we are inundated. We are so busy, it's ridiculous. So we did put in for extra funding 2 years ago to bring us in line with the West Midlands branch, because they were the closest. They're not the same as us, but they're the closest thing to us. We were turned down, and we were turned down on the basis of the fact that this branch resources review was being done, and once it was all done, it would all be marvellous. So for 2 years, we have really struggled. I mean, really struggled. The review definitely does benefit us. We have been acknowledged in it, and I can see in some parts of it that they are catering towards the complexity of a communities branch and acknowledging our existence. Plus the outsourcing now, so many local government, you know, outsourced workers attached to local government and health branches, which people really struggle with. And I just say, just phone me, because all of mine are outsourced workers. We've got 5,000 of them. We know it. I suppose the preamble of this is, this will benefit us, but it will not benefit us to the level that we had previously applied for. So if this goes through next week, and when the figures come out, we actually go, yeah, this is great, thank you so much, but actually it's not enough, I need more. Is it going to be an easy process for us to do that? Because the current thing of being turned down flat because the review's being done and not even getting a written acknowledgement of that for nearly 2 years before I actually could get the letter is not hopeful. So basically, okay, if I need more, can I come to you guys, and are you going to do it rather than me having to chase people for 2 years and just get more and more frustrated?
Okay, thanks ever so much, Pat. So so when you ask, what answer are you going to get? How quickly are you going to get it? And how easy is it going to be to get that answer? Yeah. Christina, obviously meet Pat, Christina. Would you like to comment on Pat's situation and obviously how this looks for her branch?
I would, and I think Josie wants to come in as well. But can I just say, I'm sorry it's taken you 2 years to get a response, Pat. That shouldn't be happening, and I'm happy to look into it if you want. But I think for me, a big part of why we're doing this is specifically to deal with branches precisely like yours. That was one of the driving forces behind it, is to recognise that the world has changed and that the world of our branches is changing. Not just branches like yours that are covering a large geographical area where you've got incredibly challenging employer situation to deal with, but also the impact that has on the fact that the world has changed on the other types of branches. So if you like, what would be considered the more traditional branches, most of them now have large numbers of their members who are employed outside of the main employer. So they're employed in voluntary sector, private sector, whatever. And it's precisely to deal with that they have to do this. Will you get more money? For me, the big point, the question that I think I hope will be best addressed by if we get a success with their branch support and organising fund. For me, Josie said it earlier, she's excited by this. I'm excited by this. I made a big point in my campaign of saying, and I'm still committed to this, is I want to see us giving more resources to regions and devolved countries to recognise what happens in the English regions and the devolved parts of the Union, that decisions are not all taken at Westminster, then they're certainly not all taken in that. We don't all do things through national negotiations, and we have to recognise that as a union. So for me, that's where I think, and a branch like yours, you'll have the funding formula and the settlement you get from it, but I would say specifically that's what I think partly what the branch support and organising fund is for. But as I think it was Lilian said it earlier, that the key part of that is not that it's centrally driven. So it's not that we're saying this is the formula for how you can access the branch support and organising fund and this cannot change. It will be precisely given to regions and devolved parts of the country to say, what are the priorities in your area? What is it you need to do to make life better for your branches and take services closer to the membership and respond to the different types of membership, and use that branch support and organising fund for that. And I will give a commitment here tonight that I will keep that under close supervision. How are we spending the money? Are we getting value for money? Is it going to the right branches and the right campaigns? So it won't be a total free-for-all in regions. There will be an accountability to say this is how we've spent it. But the decisions will be getting taken by the lay leadership in the regions on this, not by me or the NEC telling you this is what you'll have to spend the money on as lay leaders in Wales, for example, or in any other part of the region. So I can't give you a cast iron guarantee tonight, Pat, as you would expect, but we'll put it this way. If a year from now we've got this system in place and you come back and say to me, actually, this hasn't helped us, then please do tell me if that's what's happening, and I guarantee you I'll come out and look at it.
Thank you, Christina.
Many thanks, Christina. Thanks ever so much for that. Josie, did you want to come back on this point at all?
Just very, very briefly, because I think Christina's probably said quite a lot of what I would have wanted to say as well. I just to a tiny little angle in there as well is I can't answer the question about your own personal, branch circumstances. However, what is still there, obviously we've got the funding formula, we've got the branch support and organising fund. Within the proposed branch funding formula, there is still a facility for what we call Section C funding, which is exceptional funding, which potentially sounds like that is what you had applied for and initially didn't get a positive response to. I don't know about that conversation. However, that facility is still there, and maybe, I know there's been a lot of changes in your area in recent times, but maybe if post-implementation of this, you'll still have particular difficulties, that's another conversation that's worth having again as well. And like Christina, and I'm sure every one of us on this tonight, if we can't guarantee the outcome of the question when you ask it, but we can ensure that you get an answer. That's the one area where we can ensure that you'll get something coming back. Thanks
very much, Josie. And just rolling back slightly, we talked about the different types of branches, and we were one of the questions that was raised, but I don't think we covered fully, was about geographical spread. I'm being quite selfish here because the Eastern region is rather large, so I'd be interested to know about that, please. Josie? Thank you.
Absolutely. So I think it was Duncan who had originally asked it, and I can see he's asked 3 questions now in the chat. So I'll see what I can do, although I can't see all the questions, so I hopefully won't forget them. Geographical spread, it exists in the current funding formula, it exists in the proposed funding formula. We're not proposing to make any changes to geographical spread, so that measurement will remain the same now as it currently does. However, this was raised with us at a recent session. It's worth just checking. I don't know, Duncan, if you're a branch secretary or a branch treasurer, but if you are, you should have access to ALBA. If you go into ALBA, you can check what your geographical spread measurement is at the moment. Now, we take that from the information that you provide on your annual financial return, that your branch provides on the annual financial return each year. It turns out that a lot of branches just roll over what they had in previous years, and somebody happened to raise it, and it turned out that a number of branches were saying, oh, actually, that's not accurate anymore. So it's worth probably checking that, because we don't generally challenge branches about that. They give us the information and we just keep running with it until they tell us it's changed. So it's worth just checking it, and other people on the call as well, check that the information that was on your annual financial return, and i.e. the data that we're using around geographical spread, is still accurate. If it's changed, then you need to advise our National Finance Department. What they can do is they can update it. Obviously, annual financial returns aren't due in again now until March 2022, but it's possible. Update it, change your data, and ask to get your funding formula recalculated. What I will say, to be fair to Unison's national finance staff, I don't think that will happen this week or next week. They're going to be very, very busy, probably, getting through the conference and then picking up the loose ends as they catch up with the backlog. So probably it won't be resolved until the end of June, but definitely just check that calculation's correct going forward, and we can recalculate mid-year for you. You asked something about your industrial action fund. I don't know. Again, individual branch circumstances. I don't know if your branch has an industrial action fund. All branches are entitled to have an industrial action fund, but you do need to get those arrangements agreed at annual general meetings. We have a scheme. If a strike fund is something that your branch is interested in having, and you're not sure exactly how to go about it, get a bit of advice from your regional organiser in the first instance, and then make the appropriate proposals at an annual, obviously a quarter annual general meeting, and you can set up a strike fund from there. We don't encourage branches to have huge strike funds, but it's perfectly valid, legitimate, and reasonable for branches to hold a modest strike fund. So make those arrangements if that's something. I think what your question said, it wasn't supported a couple of years ago. I don't know if that means it wasn't supported by a general meeting a few years ago, but a few years have passed. I think it's probably worth going down that road again. I'm really sorry, I can't remember the third question, Duncan.
Josie, I was gonna bring Duncan in at this
sorry.
point. No, it's absolutely fine. Obviously, I don't want Duncan to think that we've sort of been circumventing him in any way. So Duncan, does that answer your question, or have you got further comment that you'd like to put to the panel?
Yes, thank you very much. It does answer the majority of my questions. It is very difficult to get advice on calculating the geographical spread. The question around that was more that the geographical spread allowance was totally wiped out by restrictions for high reserves. And if that situation is going to be mirrored in 2025, then that's something we need to plan for over the next few years.
Thank you.
That was it, really.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Duncan. Josie or the panel, do you want to quickly come back on that?
Unfortunately, it might not be a popular answer, But you are correct, Duncan, if you have very high reserves, what happens is as your reserves get higher, you know, the relative wealth of your branch is sort of recognised as being healthy, and therefore what happens is we start to restrict those additional entitlements, and that includes geographic spread among others. If you start to spend your reserves, if your reserves reduce, what happens is you stop having the restriction applied to your additional entitlements. Now, I don't know how high your branch reserves are. We absolutely don't advocate things like fire sales to try and reduce branch reserves, but if there's good branch activity taking place that requires the expenditure of branch reserves, we don't take a dim view of that either. It's when we become concerned is when branches have a situation where they're planning on being in a deficit spending position every year for every foreseeable year, and that's when we have to have conversations with branches about how we can support them for that not to continue being the case, because eventually a branch will end up being in financial difficulty, and they need to be supported to ensure that they don't encounter that. However, if you do have very healthy branch reserves, one way, of course, is if you create that industrial action fund immediately, that would reduce your reserves by some degree.
Yeah, thank you very much for explaining that. It was the restriction for high reserves was set at £17 a member, or around £18 a member, a few years ago, and it's good that you've clarified the very high reserves is higher than that. So.
Thanks very much, Duncan. Thanks, Josie. I'm going to move us on. We've had one more question submitted in advance, so I'll move to that and look for a response from our panel, and then I'll open up to the floor for anyone who hasn't already been engaged in this session. So the last question that we got in advance is from William Bound from Shropshire General, and his question was, how will the proposed changes affect my branch and the activities of retired members within it? So happy to go to any of the panel who want to come in on this.
So I'll come in if that's okay.
Perfect, thanks Lilian.
Thanks Becky. I don't know the branch, so the proposals are there, and it's for the branch to look to see how the proposals affect the branch. The regions have got all the information, as Christina said, and if you need further information, contact your regional secretary, regional convener, and I'm sure they'll happily give you your individual breakdown of how it affects you individually as a branch. How will it affect retired members? Well, our retired members are an integral part of our trade union. The work that they do for Unison and our members is hugely important, and this should not in any way affect their ability to support branches, to support the organising agenda, and in fact I think with the Branch Support and Organising Fund, it will enhance their ability to work with others in order to organise those branches effectively, and indeed organise retired members effectively. So I don't see any negative impact on the retired members and their ability to continue the fantastic work they do on behalf of members within Unison.
Many thanks, Lilian. Okay. I don't know where the last 40 minutes have gone. We've got through all the questions that were submitted in advance. So if you want to ask a question and it hasn't already been, the information that you want hasn't been covered, it'd be great if you could just put a note in the chat for me, and we'll get to as many people as we can as we go forward. And you'll have to bear with me if there is anything, because I'm sat here and I've got a mouse next to me, but it's not actually for the device I'm on. So just to make things more complicated for myself. Okay, I think there was a question earlier about or there was a comment about CaseWeb. So let's have a look. So that was Kath Holmes, I think it was, and I think we touched on CaseWeb, but I wondered whether someone wants to come in on the decision around CaseWeb and obviously those other parts of the package, because there's parts we haven't touched on yet.
I would like to nominate Maureen Lamarinel for that one. She looks really pleased to be nominated, I would like to say. But she did lead on that work stream, and I think it would be most appropriate.
I completely agree. Maureen, CaseWeb, what do you reckon?
Thanks very much, Josie, and thanks, Becky, for that. No, I think Kath in the chat makes the case at £60 a month. I think Josie covered a little bit of it earlier by saying that branches with less than 2,000 members, that is halved to £30 a month. And Kath makes the point that for a branch that only has 1 or 2 cases a year, that's not cost effective. I would assume that what she's saying. Now, in relation to that, CaseWeb isn't just for cases that you think are going to turn into legal cases, or they're going to turn into cases that you've got to send to the region. It's a really good way of mapping out the cases that you as branch activists are dealing with. If you're dealing with a lot of health and safety cases, you're going to be able to search those and see if those health and safety issues are in one department, and therefore you're going to be able to plan and campaign your work around that issue and form a campaign for the branch. So it's live and interactive, so you don't have to write a lot of paper, so it meets the union's green agenda, what we're trying to work towards. So CaseWeb is much more than just something that you're going to have to send to region, or that you're going to have to send to legal. There's lots of other things that you can do with CaseWeb. It meets the green agenda, as I've said, and it also meets GDPR, which is absolutely key for every branch, for the whole union, because if we get GDPR wrong, then that's like a £5 million sort of tap on the wrist for us if we get that wrong. So CaseWeb can do so much more, and you know, I understand that people have got different priorities, but I think if it's used in the right and proper way, it can enhance what the branch does. It can help with the work planning. It can help with the campaign planning. And in order to do that, that's why we recognise that a lot of smaller branches, it was unaffordable. So we have brought it down. It might be able to be brought down again in the future if branches sign up to it. Currently, there's about 130 branches signed up out of 826. Now, so there is a very big pool of branches that could take advantage of CaseWeb, and the more branches that take advantage of it, the more that we can go to our supplier and say, now that we've got this, we want to reduce the fees that you're taking on for this, and therefore we would then be able to pass that saving on to branches even more. Because my view is that if we're saying that CaseWeb is the system for us, then CaseWeb should be free to branches, and that's where I wanted to get to, and that's where I would still like the union to get to in the future. But we need people to take advantage of it and use it in the way that it was created for. I hope that helps with that. I noticed also that Kath mentioned that Unison should be asking Unity Bank why it's not paying interest on the millions that it holds on our behalf. Well, it's my understanding that we are talking to Unity Bank in relation to a lot of things, and that is one of them, Kath. So I hope that that answers that one as well. So thanks very much.
Yeah, can I just say thank you, Maureen, for those explanations. explanations, much appreciated.
Thanks, Kath, and thanks, Maureen. I know there was obviously a lot of work that went into that and all the other parts of the review group. All the proposals, I mean, I was there, I lived it. I'll remember it till I pass this mortal coil. I think Katrina Kuma has a question she'd like to come in with. Is that, if I'm correct, Katrina?
No, I think it's already been answered by, is it Christina? It was in relation to about, is this funding are we expected to buy the reserves of the region for our branch in particular? If we needed to pay for reserves, and it would be for things like caseworkers in our private sector, then as a branch we would look to pay for that ourselves and not pay the region, but Christina's already explained. So thank you, Christina.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Katrina. Let's have a look. Oh, Dawn's popped up, and I can't see your surname, but Dawn, who's just asked a question, if you want to just pose that to the panel, that would be fantastic.
Hiya, thank you. It's a question about the central procurement support that you've included in the motion 22 and how quickly you could put that in place. So, for example, Leeds's IT infrastructure is old and it needs to be replaced. So it would be, is it worth going and doing that straight away, or is it worth waiting for what support we might get from the centralised procurement proposals, if that makes sense?
It does make sense. It's amazing how we always question that we're not making sense, and we're definitely making sense. Thanks ever so much, Dawn. Can I ask one of the panel to come in briefly on Dawn's question, please, and then we're nearly at the end of the session, I'm afraid.
Can I just quickly ask Becky, if you don't mind, because I think we definitely can help Dawn with this, but my one of the Assistant General Secretaries who's in charge of this whole bit of the union is Emily Old now is on the call, and maybe Emily could answer that if that's okay.
That would be great. Yeah, Emily, if you can address Dawn's question.
You need somebody to unmute you. Can somebody unmute Emily?
Yeah.
There you go.
Gosh, that was a bit scary. Yes, just very quickly, Dawn, we've already started to look at sourcing a central system. And indeed, when Lilian mentioned earlier the information about the survey, when branches told us, you know, one of the most important things is saving them time and also obviously value for money. And if you buy in bulk and if you do things on in a systematic way through a national procurement system, essentially you can do both those things in a branch. We heard lots of horror stories from branches where they bought bits of kit or technology, particularly that they didn't need or then they couldn't utilise properly. It wouldn't work with their own systems, it wouldn't link together. Nowadays, technology and infrastructure is really quite complicated. And so we can already offer that on a individual basis to branches through our IT department, and our procurement team that sit in Unison Centre. But what we're currently doing is sourcing a kind of national database and national system with approved suppliers that we know have the best value for money, and also put Unison's ethical procurement policy at its heart too. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you. Are you the right person to contact to follow that up after this meeting?
Yeah, no problem, Dawn, no problem.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Emily, and thanks, Dawn. Thank you, everyone. We are going to open a further poll now, which would be grateful for your participation in that poll. I'd like to thank everyone for their contributions tonight. Josie, Lilian, Christina, thank you for forming our panel tonight. Would any of you like to say a few words before I close the meeting? The floor is yours.
I'll go first and then I'll leave Josie and Christina to end the meeting. I think just to thank colleagues for the participation and also thank all of those 24 lay activists who participated, did huge amounts of work in terms of bringing the proposals to the Special Delegate Conference. The commitment, the outstanding commitment from those members and indeed the staff and the project team has been absolutely fantastic. This is a whole package. What I would like the message to go away from today is, what we've not really spoke about is the elements within the package that address our green agenda, that look to reduce our carbon footprint. I would ask you to read it. It meets with the climate emergency in terms of all of the proposals that you've got before you, looking at better use of IT, some of the infrastructure that we spoke about just minutes ago in terms of the procurement, but also how we use this technology. For the last 15 months, this is how we've been operating. We should not walk away from that. This is a fantastic opportunity to reduce our carbon footprint. So I would ask you to consider fully the motion, to vote for the motion, absolutely. And a failure for me would be any single person coming to this Special Delegate Conference, anyone saying, oh, I don't know about this branch resources review, because we have gone through the biggest consultation exercise that Unison has ever entered into. So just thanking everybody for their participation and hope that you see the value and benefits of the branch resources review proposals and vote for the motion.
Do you want me to go next and give Josie the last word as she's been so bound up in this? I mean, for me, what it does is it's probably the biggest consultative exercise I think we've ever done in the union. You know, getting information, getting opinions back from branches and trying to deal with such a big issue. We know it's always going to be difficult. We know it's always going to be challenging on this level, but this is about trying to modernise the union and make sure that our resources are in the right place, doing what they should be doing, and that we can do everything we can to support branches. And I think somebody said it, I think, in something, we're not a federation of branches, we're a collective trade union, which means we support each other and we do things like we take some of the biggest legal cases of any trade union, we take on the big difficult cases, we campaign on a wide range of issues. So it's not just about what happens to individuals, but it's about also taking that collective view, and I think that's what's so important, and that's what makes our union, I think, so vibrant and so unique in many ways. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to also address one key issue, which is not every problem can be solved at branch level, and nor should we expect it to be, because our branch activists are already overwhelmed by the job they've got. So this is about recognising that some issues need to be dealt with on a regional or devolved country basis, on a cross-branch basis, or dealt with at a national level within the union. And that's about trying to recognise that the capacity as a union to be flexible in how we deal with the complex issues that we all have to deal with. So this is about, first and foremost, giving support to our members through making sure that our branches are well resourced and our regions and devolved countries and the Unison Centre have got the facilities and resources in the right place. But thank you for your time tonight.
Luckily, Lilian and Christina have said a lot of what I wanted to say, because I've probably done enough talking for one day. I'm losing my voice, which is probably a relief to any of my family if they were with me. I want to say thank you as well, because like Lilian, we're absolutely adamant. What we do not want to be is in a situation where people say they don't know what branch resources is when we get there, but actually we've invested so much in engaging with activists. I think we've spoken to well in excess of 3,000 activists now. And, you know, that's been, you know, a huge effort on our part, but it's also been a huge commitment from Unison activists that have given us their time, that they've listened, that they've quizzed, that they've pressed, they've ensured that we've made sure that we're able to bring robust proposals to Special Delegate Conference, because they've challenged us every step of the way, that we've had to stress test all of our proposals to make sure that they were going to stand up and deliver what it is that branches need. So we feel that while our proposals are not perfect, because actually I think what's become clear is that there is no perfect solution, because the perfect solution for one branch absolutely misses the mark for the next branch, because our branches are a massively diverse group. That's one of our strengths, absolutely, but that is also kind of a big challenge for us going forward. What we absolutely do believe and have complete faith in is that our proposals are really strong, and they offer undeniable improvements for all of our branches, and they offer them in different ways. But they give us huge opportunities to do something that's really transformational, not just for branches, but actually across the whole union as well. Some of the things I want to just quickly touch on that we didn't talk about and delve into in too much depth tonight, or when we talked about the Branch Support and Organising Fund, we want that to be something that doesn't just go out and recruit and organise members, but it actually invests in helping capacity build among the activists in branches, both with the existing activists, but also those fledgling activists that those organising projects may bring in, so that as we continue to move forward, we're not just building our membership base, but we're continuing to build our activist base, so that the union continues to be vibrant, to be relevant, and meet the needs of our members and activists going forward. We want a facility time campaign. Branch activists have told us again and again that time is what we need. We can have a facility time campaign, absolutely, but what we want is a facility time campaign that's high profile and that the whole union is committed to. And we want a conference mandate coming out of Special Delegate Conference that says we want these proposals and we want the facility time campaign as well. And we want to see that on the agenda of our national committees, our regional committees and our branch committees, so that all of those conversations are taking place, not in silos, but with that information getting fed up through the union and then getting fed back down again, so that we're providing and producing the resources and materials that branches need, and that they're getting the on-the-ground support to start to deliver some outcomes. And if we deliver some wins there, there'll be a ripple effect and we can start to deliver real improvements for our branches. That's the sort of thing that we want to be able to see investment in. And Christina talked about all of the organising opportunities and why we need this conversation to be on a cross-sector, cross-regional basis. It's really, really important that we start to use this as a culture shift away from branches working as silos, but actually that we start to utilise our collective strength much more going forward. So we think this is a really, really strong package that can absolutely deliver changes. What we all need to do in order to ensure that this does deliver what it can deliver is that we not only are able to have good attendance at Special Delegate Conference and we vote in support of it, but actually that we all commit to ensuring that we get the implementation and that we see the changes happen in our branches going forward, and that we continue to be voices to ensure that we achieve not just what's in the motion, but further opportunities down the line as well, so that we can keep improving in the future. But this gives us a really strong basis to do that from. So I really hope that people are at the conference, they're able to support, and thanks very much for your time tonight, folks.
Thanks very much, Josie. Thanks, Christina, and thanks, Lilian. And my biggest thanks really to yourselves, the members and activists who have come along this evening, and to any of the other events to find out more and to learn more and have been positive. Chairing these has actually been it's been a joy for me to do, which chairs don't often get to say that. So I'm gonna enjoy that. I'm going to revel in that tonight. Thanks again for attending. We'll see you at Special Delegate Conference next week. And hopefully we'll meet in person in the future. So thanks ever so much again, and see you all soon. Take care.
Thanks everyone. Bye.